All right, the first thing is you have been given a piece of paper that has all 17 spellings for the major scale on it. So you'll see that one piece of paper that's in blue and red there. That's the one, yeah. Show that to everybody, would you please see? That piece of paper there, that is all of the spellings of all of the scales, all 17 of them. Now there are, on the piano here, there are 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 letter names and then they repeat. So we use the alphabet letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And those 7 letters of the alphabet are the white keys on the piano. Now a lot of this music theory is what I call white key centric. White key centric. That is, you're a guitar player and you're learning to play the guitar and they're going to teach you how to make a major scale and they say, well, play a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and a half step. And you go, what the hell's a whole step on my guitar? I don't have whole steps on the guitar. I don't have half steps on the guitar. Well, that's because some people see these little white keys as steps going up and down stepping stones. And so that language is being brought over from the piano. Whole step means 2 tones. Whole step means 2 tones, and then half step meant 1 tone. Going from the C up to the C, if you count, there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tones. There are 12 tones, folks. That's the language. And we refer to them as the chromatic scale. Chromatic, or chroma, meaning all color. So all of the colors that there are in that scale. Now, I prefer the scientific term, which is semitone. Going from a white key to a black key is a tone. Going from a black key to a white key is a tone. Going from this white key to that black key is a tone. Going from here to there is a tone. Going from that E to that F is a tone. But I call them semitones. Basically, we take the octave from C to C, or D to D, or E to E, in other words, when the letter name repeats, and we take that piece of string, let's say I have a string that's this long that represents that octave, I divide it into 12 equal pieces. And when I divide that string into 12 equal pieces, I wind up with essentially the frets on a guitar. So when you look at the frets on the guitar, now even though they're not all the same size, there's a reason for that later, but if I were to hold my finger on one of those frets and play that tone, and then move to the next fret on that string, that distance that I'm hearing is 1 tone or 1 semitone. That's how I like to refer to them. It's 1 semitone. So the octave, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, is divided into 12 equal pieces, or we call them 12 chromatic tones, or 12 semitones. Now, when mankind crawled out of the cave, I remember last week I explained to you that the first thing we did, instead of creating music, was to beat on logs so our children could get back to our own house without being eaten by the neighbors, because people were cannibals back then, basically. And if you wandered off out of your camp and into someone else's camp, they generally either took you as a slave or they had you for dinner. So the first practical use for music was beating on hollow logs and beating a specific rhythm pattern, which became, that was your, well, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it the totem. That was your totem rhythm. That's your totem animal. Each tribe worships something, like one tribe worships the lion, and another tribe worships the ostrich. So you're from the ostrich clan, or you're from the tiger clan. Well, you could also be from the drum, alligator drum clan. Or you could be from the Tarzan, alligator drum clan. Or you could be from the drum, Tarzan drum clan. See what I'm saying? And these are all totem symbols that were tagged onto us so we knew where home was. So what happened is, and when we crawled out of the caves, we didn't know there were 12 tones. the human consciousness and the human ear was not sophisticated enough to know that singing that octave could be divided into 12 equal pieces. It took 2,000 years of science before we got there, okay? I read books this thick on tuning that describe 2,500 years of tuning systems that have been come into play and come in and out of existence. And it wasn't until we got to what we call the 12th root of 2, which is what this semitone system is based on, which only happened, by the way, it was codified in 1939. That's how early this system is. Now, a lot of people don't realize that A, which on the piano, which is 440 cycles per second, was not agreed on as an international standard until around the 1930s. And in 1939, the Boulder, Colorado Bureau of Standards established A, 440, as the tuning standard. And then every piano, every harpsichord, every guitar, every flute, every whistle around the world started using that international code, that international reference point, as a way to create music. And so it has only been 1933 was when it was 1939. Before that, it was down around 435 cycles per second. And you go 20 years before that, and it was about 432 cycles per second. And if you go all the way back to the ancient Greeks, it was down around 300 cycles per second.
Pythagoras have something to do with that?
Yeah, Pythagoras was the first person to establish scientific basis for tuning standards by creating the pentatonic scale, or the Pythagorean scale. And that Pythagorean scale was the first well-tempered scale that, so different people on different harps could play together and make harmony. Until then, it was just a hodgepodge. And it wasn't until this century, in the Industrial Revolution, that we finally actually hit upon that standard. Now, we all sit here thinking we've heard music going back all the way to the 9th century and the 10th century and stuff like that. But what we don't realize is these reproductions that we're listening to are in our modern tuning standard. And in their tuning standard, if they were played on their instruments, in their tuning standard, the way they played them, it was probably lower in pitch and had a lot less tension in it. A lot less tension. It was not as dramatic as it is being played today. So this 12-tone standard has only been around since, let's say, 1940. So that's not a lot of time, folks, right? That's only 90 years. So this system itself is only 90 years old, okay? So have a little mercy, okay? The next thing to know is that there are only 7 letter names, because later on we went from 5-note scales to 7-note scales. And the 7-note scales proliferated like crazy, and they got around all over the place and traveled around everywhere. And so what happens is the 7-note scales became established. By that time, the harpsichord and keyboards had been created, so all the white keys on those instruments were given these 7 letter names. These 7 letter names are new. These 7 letter names were invented in the 10th century by a fellow named Otto of Clugny. And Otto of Clugny, when he first invented them, the harpsichords used to have 2 low notes down here, which he called A, B, and then C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Then C, D, E, F, G, H, I, C, D. There were 2 notes at the bottom of the piano, A and B, which only existed there and didn't repeat. And so what happened is it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, C, D, E, F. And he was the first person to write music theory books using letter names.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
I think the clock's like right there. Thank you. And so the letter names themselves didn't happen until the 11th century, and they're not the ones we're using today. It took a while before people realized that the A and the B at the bottom were not unique, and repeated later on, and it took almost 250 years for Otto of Clugny's books to go out of print and people to stop paying attention to them, until a guy by the name of Bach wanted to write a piece of music spelling his name.